Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special sharing for the Monica. And this also our first club meeting of the spring semester 2021. And first of all, we have a short meditation from Angelica. And second, we'll invite Matt, our vice president, to introduce the topic and the speaker, Monica. And at the end, if we have another questions or doubts about the topic, we can share, okay, in the meeting. Okay, let's begin the meditation, just 1 minute.
Hello, everyone. Welcome today. Thank you for joining us. If I can have you just remove quickly your glasses and anything that might feel really tight around your wrists. Make yourself just sit comfortably. If you feel ready, just close your eyes. Take 3 deep breaths just to center yourself in this moment. Make sure that you're muted at this time if you haven't already. Gently breathe in, breathe out. As you're in this moment of centeredness, feeling the sensations of your breath, feeling hopefully some sense of calmness coming into your body. Think of something that you're grateful for in this moment. Imagine the joy that the sense of gratefulness brings to you. Let yourself physically smile. Now, as you're in this moment holding this sense of gratefulness, think of someone that you like to dedicate this moment and give this moment of joy and these merits to that person, in group, being, whoever that may be. Join your hands together as we together take one final deep breath in unison. Inhale, exhale. Gently open your eyes when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angelica. And next, invite our Vice President, Matt, to introduce our Monica.
Yeah, welcome everyone on behalf of the Chaplaincy Club. Today, Monica is going to be presenting from her book, new book, Kalyanamitra, a Buddhist model of spiritual care. This is exciting. It's important academic work for Buddhist chaplains, and hopefully in the future, there'll be a clinical component. I'm just going to give just a little potted biography of the good Reverend Doctor from her academia website. Monica is one of only 2 Buddhists in North America to lead a religious life department at a college or university. As the head of spirituality and religious life at Rochester Institute of Technology, Reverend Dr. Sanford oversees a program with active on-campus Buddhist, Christian, Hindu, Jewish, pagan, and Muslim communities and student clubs, while also coordinating interfaith programs and an innovative outreach program for secular and non-religious students called Department 42. while Monica is presenting, maybe you can include some questions that you might have at the end in chat. I'll have some questions to kick off, just maybe a short Q&A session. So until then, we'll just all welcome Monica to our little event. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Matt, and thank you for inviting me, everyone. I really appreciate it. We will have random cameos from the cat, and we may have the dogs chime in at random points with their own feedback, usually about the neighbors, not about whatever it is I'm doing, but they let us know. So I apologize for that in advance. I work best with visual aids, so I am going to share my screen with y'all. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Thank you so much. I do like audience participation. So as Matt said, I'm here to talk a little bit about my new book, which looks like this, Kalyanamitra, a model for Buddhist spiritual care. So this book is out now. It's from Sumeru Press. You can also just get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any of those locations. We tried to make sure it was not exorbitantly expensive like textbooks sometimes can be, so I hope it's rather reasonable for all of you. So as Matt said, I am the Assistant Director for Spirituality and Religious Life at Rochester Institute of Technology, which is in Western New York, and currently under about 2 feet of snow, which we are enjoying very much here. I am also an alumni of University of the West. I finished my MDiv there in 2013. I was part of the second cohort of graduates from UWest. From there, I went on to a PhD in practical theology at our consortium partner, Claremont School of Theology, and I finished that in 2008, and then moved from sunshine and beaches to snow and trees. So here I am now. In addition to this book, I've also published quite a bit along with another US alumni, Nathan Jishin Michon. We wrote the entry on Buddhist chaplaincy for the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of Religions, which is available, and lots of different conference presentations and book chapters on the topics of Buddhist chaplaincy, higher education chaplaincy, and teaching religion. And those can be found on my academia.edu profile, which I'll have a link to at the end. But today I just want to start out with a brief reading from the book. I'll give you an overview of the research methods that I used to develop what is the Three Prajnas framework and the Kalyanamitra model, which is part of the framework. And then I'll just open it up for questions, and maybe y'all have some questions. You can put them in the chat as they come up to you so you don't forget them, or you can save them to the end, or Matt will ask questions at the end. How does that sound to everyone? Okay. So today I'm going to start with a reading from page 82. When I was doing my research, I came to a point where basically I knew what my theory was. I knew what my theory was, and I was struggling to explain it. And for some reason, writing it in the form of a sutta, a Pali form sutta, just seemed like the most natural thing in the world. And I sent it to my advisor and I said, I know I'm not going to use this in my dissertation, right? Because those are all academic and formal and scholarly. But this is how I understand it. This is what makes sense to me. So I just wanted to share it with you so that you know what I'm thinking. And he said, of course you have to put it in your dissertation, right? And ultimately it made it into the book. So I'm just going to read this for you all. Listen well, noble friends. Thus I have heard in the data. There are 3 types of wisdom that must be developed in learning the Dharma, considering the Dharma, and coming to know the Dharma for oneself if one wishes to be a spiritual friend to others. One must develop wisdom by listening, by contemplating, and by practicing. These 3 tasks to develop 3 types of wisdom follow a 4-fold path. Regarding wisdom based on listening, first, One listens to the Dharma for one's own edification. Second, having developed interest, one dedicates oneself to listening as a student, guided and accompanied by a spiritual friend in the form of a teacher, mentor, or other learned person. Third, having developed compassion, one listens to learn to be of service to others. Finally, having developed wisdom based on listening, one listens to others to serve them along their own spiritual paths as a spiritual friend. Regarding wisdom based on contemplating, first, one contemplates what one has heard to make sense of it for oneself. Second, having developed some ideas, one contemplates in companionship and dialogue with others, particularly one's spiritual friends. Third, having refined one's understanding, one contemplates in what way to best serve others in light of their varied circumstances. Finally, having developed wisdom based on contemplating, one aids others in contemplating to make sense of their own circumstances as a spiritual friend. Regarding wisdom based on practicing, first, one practices meditation and other spiritual exercises for the sake of one's own awakening. Second, having developed concentration, one practices meditation, chanting, ritual, and other forms under the guidance of a teacher, mentor, or spiritual friend. Third, having developed some attainments, one practices caring for others, having seen one's own awakening is bound up with theirs. Finally, having developed wisdom based on practicing, one accompanies others to better aid them in their liberation as a spiritual friend. Thus, one has developed wisdom through listening, contemplating, and practicing, following a fourfold path. One proceeds in this manner of developing wisdom based on listening, contemplating, and practicing, because one realizes through the process of listening, contemplating, and practicing that one's own suffering is inextricably bound up with the suffering of others. One realizes that compassion, the will towards freedom from suffering for all beings, is inextricably bound up with wisdom. One realizes that self is other and other is self. Self is no different from other and other is not separate from self. One realizes that one cannot proceed on the spiritual path alone without spiritual friends, and that through proceeding on the spiritual path, one becomes a spiritual friend to many. When, through developing wisdom by listening, contemplating, and practicing for oneself, these realizations occur, one seeks out a spiritual community and a teacher with whom to develop further wisdom by listening, contemplating, and practicing. When one is surrounded by spiritual friends in the form of a community and teachers, one may then apply oneself towards liberation from suffering for all beings. This may be done in various ways and involve various new skills, which must be learned through listening, contemplating, and practicing. When, through developing wisdom by listening, contemplating, and practicing in service of others, one comes to know that others also listen, contemplate, and practice in various ways towards their own liberation from suffering, one then gains the skill to facilitate and accompany them on this journey as a spiritual friend. This skill improves if one has also had the experience of being accompanied on one's own journey and encouraged to develop wisdom by listening, contemplating, and practicing by a spiritual friend, such as a mentor, teacher, or peer. While one is accompanying others, one continues to develop wisdom by listening, contemplating, and practicing for one's own awakening as part of a community with a teacher, and to improve one's skill in serving others. One may also continue to be accompanied by spiritual friends who support one's growth towards awakening. When these practices become widespread, we form a community of spiritual friends, a sangha, all mutually concerned with one another's awakening and the liberation from suffering of society at large. Sangha, or community, is the third refuge of Buddhist practice and vital for liberation from suffering. When we serve others and accompany others in this way, we support the development of a worldwide sangha of spiritual friends, regardless of religious affiliation or belief. In this way, the overall suffering of the world is reduced and each individual's access to enlightenment is improved. Thus I have heard in the data and the world, with its numerous beings, chaplains, care seekers, teachers, and spiritual friends, rejoiced. So that is the Sutta on learning and practicing spiritual care. I'll pause there before I dive into the research and invite Thoughts, feelings, comments, questions?
I don't know, maybe this will be something we can talk about at the end. It's really interesting, this phrase. I think it's a really unique, sort of innovative literary device, and to use the sutta. And the phrase, "thus have I heard in the data," you're collecting data now, collecting data about Buddhist chaplains, from students to volunteers to professionals working in the various areas. And I'm wondering, there's what you hear in the data, and then it does seem like there is also what you aspire to, or what you hope like will exist in the future. And so, where do you see, this project that you've got going on about gathering this data to creating these communities and these sanghas of practitioners in this way?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. So I love data because data shows me things that I wouldn't normally see because of all my biases and the things that I tend to focus on or ignore, right? But when you really have to rigorously look at all the data very carefully, you'll find interesting and surprising new things. So even now, we've got about 400 surveys in our Mapping Buddhist Chaplains in North America survey project. We're doing some preliminary early data analysis, and we're already seeing really surprising trends. We did expect that some Buddhist chaplains in North America would have entered the profession with no formal education as such in pastoral care, but we didn't expect that that would be a third of all Buddhist chaplains. So in terms of forming community, if a third of all Buddhist chaplains are entering the field with no formal education, how are they forming connections to other chaplains? They're not going through an MDiv program or an educational program specifically for chaplains. Where is their community of spiritual friends, of peers, of chaplain peers, Buddhist chaplain peers specifically, who are supporting them in their work, right? One of the things that was reported to me as I collected the data that became this book were experiences of isolation. Buddhist chaplains were often the only Buddhist in their CPE cohorts, in their spiritual care departments, in their hospitals. So, excuse her, they did regularly report those experiences of isolation. And if we're all isolated from each other, no wonder it's taken literally decades of chaplaincy for things like books and journal articles and encyclopedia entries to germinate, because we're all kind of working in our lonesome and we're missing the power that the community and the Sangha brings. So that's a quick reflection on things that we're seeing in the data that are just so fascinating.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to ask quickly, I'll get more out of reading, but I was caught by just a quick question about whether to you, spiritual friendship maps completely over spiritual care, or, or where the important overlap is, and whether the sutta speaks more to one distinction than the other, perhaps.
So just briefly, I'll say that I do believe spiritual friendship is bigger than spiritual care, but that every practice that I have as a Buddhist chaplain that's related to my work of spiritual care, I can conceptualize within the paradigm of spiritual friendship, that I am acting as a spiritual friend. Even when I'm putting in budget requests, right? That's on somebody's behalf for somebody's benefit in a spiritual sense. So I believe that my work can be fully mapped onto a paradigm of spiritual friendship. It's also going to be informed by a lot of other things, interreligious literacy, cultural competencies. But to me, those are upaya, right? Those are the skillful means of spiritual friends, right? But I do believe that spiritual friends is bigger than just chaplaincy. Teachers, friends, peers, Sangha members are also spiritual friends.
Thank you. It's nice because it brings into spiritual care a color that I hadn't really considered in a very sustained way before. I appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Shannon. All right, so I'm going to move to a little bit more about the theory, the theoretical stuff. And I'm going to start by talking just about the research methods. So how did this develop? So it developed really from the wisdom of others. I'm stealing the wisdom of others, right? 13 Buddhist chaplains whom I interviewed who are working in hospitals, hospice, the military, prisons, schools. You can see their statistics there. Caucasian, Asian American, and Latino, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, some monastic, some ordained, some not ordained, mostly graduates of the formal training programs, such as at CST, Harvard, Institute of Buddhist Studies, Naropa, U.S., and Emmanuel College, which is part of the University of Toronto. All of them were either at least enrolled in or had completed CPE units. Because part of the focus of my initial research was I wanted to understand how Buddhist chaplains meet a particular CPE competency, which is the ability to engage in for oneself and facilitate theological reflection for others. That was the root of my early inquiry. And in inquiring about that process, it blossomed into all these other things. But because that is a competency in CPE, I did confine my research pool to Buddhist chaplains who were engaged or had completed CPE. Through those the chaplains, I collected 165,000 words of interviews and written reflections, and these were analyzed using constructivist grounded theory methods. Now, for those of you who haven't done a lot of research methods, saying that that I'm a constructivist grounded theory researcher isn't going to mean a lot to you. But just to let you know, it's a very rigorous process of collecting, transcribing, looking at the data line by line, word by word, sentence by sentence, and recoding it for all kinds of themes, and then looking at how the codes overlap. It doesn't really look like Dharma when you have it on your computer screen, but once patterns start to emerge, it's a really beautiful thing. So one of the patterns that emerged from that data was the three prajnas. So these are defined on page 86 of the book. They are Shrutamaya Prajna, Sintamaya Prajna, and Bhavanamaya Prajna. And please excuse all of my Americanized mispronunciations of these things. But basically they track to the wisdom from listening, from contemplating, and from practicing. There are alternative translations. There is, however, no kind of definitive singular. Different teachers use them in slightly different ways. They'll say hearing, heard, listened, reasoning, thinking, meditating, cultivating. They use different terms. So I just finally had to pick terms. So I'm like, all right, we're going to go with listening, contemplating, and practicing. And that's my preferred translation, but that doesn't mean that's the only way these terms are ever translated. So this is a pattern that actually already exists in the Dharma. It's explicated in the Digha Nikaya and then in the Abhidharma, both the Pali Abhidharma and the Sarvastivadin Abhidharma, which is where it jumps from into Mahayana. So it's a relatively minor concept actually in the Dharma. When you go looking for the three prajnas, you don't actually find much. It's part of Buddhist pedagogy. It's treated very straightforwardly, and it doesn't get a lot of attention. Prajna itself gets a ton of attention, but the three prajnas, not so much. But it did come up in my data. Some of my research subjects referenced them explicitly. They said the three prajnas, while others of them talked about the process of learning using this format of listening, of reflecting and thinking about it, of putting it into practice. And ultimately, once you're like, oh, there's this pattern, and then you start looking at everything else, you start to see it everywhere, right? So that led to the development of the three prajnas framework for spiritual care, which asserts that chaplains tend to progress through this framework during their spiritual and professional formation. So this framework is, in some senses, descriptive, right? It's descriptive of my study participants, what they reported to me. It's also an interpretation of their experience, and it can, to some degree be normative or prescriptive. We can use it to say, well, this is the normal progression, right? The 4 stages are self, student, chaplain, and then spiritual friend or Kalyanamitra. And in each of these stages, there is a process of developing wisdom from listening, contemplating, and practicing. No stage is ever entirely left behind. It's very iterative, right? So even though I'm not a student anymore, I still find myself reflecting on things at the level of self for my own ongoing spiritual formation. And I still attend conferences and I learn from other people in the guise of a student, while I'm also practicing as a chaplain and doing my best to enact spiritual friendship. Right? So you never really leave these behind. Each of these little boxes, so like the wisdom of contemplating developed during the time you're a student, can be further broken down. And I'm not going to show you the breakdown of each and every one of these. If you want it, it's in the book. You can look at it in the book. I'm just going to show you a couple. So another pattern that emerged in the data is a pattern called ground path fruition, which I sometimes translate as intention, task, and outcome. That's not exactly what ground path fruition is, but sometimes you have to make things broader so that an audience who's not naturally familiar with that concept can grasp how it's being used here. So at the stage of the chaplain, which is actually stage 3, when you're developing the prajna of listening, there is a particular intention to that. There is a particular thing that you are doing, an intention that you're doing with a task that you're doing, and then an outcome of that task, right? So when you're the chaplain, you're trying to learn how to provide spiritual care and service to others. And you do that by listening to care seekers, right? Just listening in your caring relationships, but also listening to yourself in those relationships, right? If someone is telling you a story of their trauma, you are listening to them very actively and attentively and compassionately, but you're also listening to yourself when you go, oh my gosh, this is so scary, right? You're like internal. And the fruition of that is a really engaged presence. You're fully there, you're fully witnessing, right? So this can be broken down for all 3 of the prajnas at each stage. And you can look at this as a training heuristic. If you're thinking to yourself, what should I be doing with care seekers? It can be useful for that. You can look at it to assess spiritual formation, right? All sorts of different things. So that's a ground path fruition at the stage of chaplain. And when I was originally developing the framework, I thought it would be 3 stages: self, student, and chaplain. But in my interviews, my research participants just kept talking about those magical moments in spiritual care when something sacred seems to happen, and we have a really hard time describing it or pinning it down, right? There's something that goes beyond chaplain, right? So I'm gonna pause because I see Jitsujo has her hand up using the little raise hand function. Jitsujo, did you want to ask a question?
Sure. I did want to ask a question. First of all, just thanks for giving this talk, and also thanks for taking the time to write this book, because it's so important for all of us. And I want to encourage our other students and alumni to take the time to write such books. But my question, and maybe you don't have to answer it right now, but I just would like to at some point, is how do you see theological reflection? I think you said we use theological reflection, something about in terms of others, how we see others, our relationship to others. So that's one question, but I guess what I'm sort of pointing to is, what if we didn't use the word theological? What would be the reflection, the Buddhist aspect of that? Like, what is it that you think we're doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's a whole topic just to do. You know me, I can go on and on and on in that. And I have some materials on my academia.edu site that specifically addresses that. I will try to get to it towards the end. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just so you guys know, I'm totally okay with ditching the word theological. We can just call it reflection. You know, that's like good enough. If you want to call it Dharma reflection, you can do that too. I don't really care. To me, it's just all reflection. So I thought maybe this would be the final stage, but my research participants kept describing something more than this, beyond this. And thinking back to my own practice as a chaplain, I could relate to that. I could say, yes, there are just sometimes these encounters with a care seeker that take you to a different place, right? Both as a chaplain and are more beneficial for the care seeker, right? So what is that? So that's what became characterized as stage 4, which is Kalyanamitra. Now, before we talk about that, just to give you some background, Kalyanamitra, the easiest, the most common translation is either good friend or spiritual friend, or good friendship, spiritual friendship, right? Friend and friendship, same word, mitra. So Kalya or Kalyana has a lot of connotations, means good, virtuous, beneficial. And those terms are also have a very specific valence in Buddhism. They mean good or beneficial in relation to the Buddhist path. And it's because, although it's original to Sanskrit and it was used in some very ancient pre-Buddhist writings, that word Kalyanamitra became so associated with Buddhism that it became synonymous with a member of the Buddhist Sangha at one point. And then Mitra is friend or friendship. And this is a culturally contextualized role. So when we think of a friend for those of us who are raised in America, we often think of, a peer and someone with whom we are on some level personally intimate, right? We talk about how friends will help you move house. Friends will help you hide the bodies. Those are American jokes. They don't really work so well when you've taken a vow against harming, but that's the general gist, right? Friends know your secrets. There's someone with whom you're on the same level. But the way we modern Americans contextualize friendship is not necessarily the same across all times and cultures. So we have to remember that. So one of the critiques, and it's in the book in more detail, is when we say spiritual friend, we don't necessarily mean friend. It is not the same thing. And there are different boundaries in a professional capacity, right? And that is something we have to communicate very clearly when we're using this model, especially with non-Buddhist audiences, right? Which is why I tend to use Kalyanamitra. I tend to use the Sanskrit term more than I use the term spiritual friend, because I don't want them to make the mistake of thinking that I see my care seekers as my friends, right? It's not the same thing. So there are various themes in this term. It's definitely a relational role. It's behaviorally defined. There are long lists of what is a good friend and what is a bad friend, right? There's Kalyanamitra, good friend, and Papa Mitra, which is bad friend. And one of my favorite terms that I ran across was actually Mitra, which is basically the Sanskrit version of frenemies, right? A friendly enemy, a friendly rival, It has a moral valence in that good friends are virtuous people, right? They're morally upstanding people. And it also has a soteriological significance in that a good friend is someone who helps you progress on your spiritual path. There are many scriptures that cover this. The most famous one is the Upada Sutta, which is in the Samyutta Nikaya, in which Ananda famously asks the Buddha, great noble one, tell me, is it true that spiritual friendship is half the holy life? And the Buddha says, no, Ananda, it's the entire holy life, right? That's the famous one. But in the Anguttara Nikaya and the Digha Nikaya, Kalyanamitra actually gets a much lengthier treatment. It's just not as fun of a story, right? Because the Anguttara is a compendium of lists. And Kalyanamitra shows up there a lot. So you can go back to that and say, well, what is a Kalyanamitra? It's in there in great, great detail. Okay. It then appears in the Mahayana literature. It's in the Prajnaparamita. There's a whole chapter in the Perfection of Wisdom in 84,000 verses on good friendship that identifies the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas as good friends. But then also it identifies the Dharma as a good friend, and the perfections themselves as good friends, and the Prajnaparamita as a good friend. So we can take that to mean the perfection of wisdom. We could also take that to mean the book that you're reading is your good friend, right? So in the Mahayana literature, in the Pali literature, good friends are only conceptualized as human persons. And then in the Mahayana literature, it takes on this more metaphorical understanding. It's also the Dharma, it's also the virtues themselves are our good friends, right? Still has this soteriological significance. Now the Vajrayana goes a little bit further, and good friendship pops up in the Lojong text. So these are the mind training texts. These are contemplative exercises. So one way that it shows up is that there are contemplative exercises in which you are encouraged to treat all beings as your friends. And the purpose of that is to overcome selfishness. So to treat all beings as your friends, even beings who harm you, because then you have the opportunity to practice patience or kindness, right? But also to treat good qualities within oneself as one's friend and bad qualities within oneself as one's enemy. They even go so far as to saying you refer to the good qualities in yourself by your Dharma name, and you refer to the qualities that you're trying to let go of by your regular birth name, right? So there are all these, so it takes on new meanings, but it exists as an important concept, as far as I can tell, in all branches of Buddhism. And it is synonymous with the Bodhisattva in the Mahayana and Vajrayana schools. Okay. So then what did we see in the data? This is from the data, from people's descriptions of those kind of special encounters that characterize listening as Kalyanamitra. So when we're listening as a Kalyanamitra, we're listening, yes, to the care seeker and to ourselves, but really we're facilitating the care seeker's ability to listen to their own wisdom, to draw out what is inherently awakened in them so that they can hear it, right? We're using conversational skills such as inquiry, reframing, challenging, correcting, gently guiding, right? And assessing the care seeker's needs as we go along for the purpose of facilitating their spiritual growth, right? So sometimes as chaplains, yes, we make people feel better because it feels better to have a companion in suffering. It feels better to be heard, but not every encounter that we have is going to facilitate the care seeker's spiritual growth. It's just not. Some people aren't ready for that. They're not interested in it. They're in too much pain. The causes and conditions aren't there. But when the causes and conditions are there, and those include us, we're part of those causes and conditions, we can help facilitate that spiritual growth for the care seeker. And that is when we step into the role of Kalyanamitra. That is what characterizes that from the care seeker's perspective. From the chaplain's perspective, those moments are also characterized by a kind of egolessness, a kind of dropping away of the preoccupation with self. We're not worried about ourselves. We're not protecting ourselves or defending ourselves. We're fully present in a selfless way. And in that sense, embodying Kalyanamitra adds to our own wisdom. It helps us progress along our spiritual path, and it's protective. The chaplains that I interviewed talked about when they feel like they can embody this presence, no matter how traumatic the situation is that the care seeker is going through or describing to them, it doesn't follow them home in the same way. There is some kind of lessening of the vicarious trauma, of the compassion fatigue, of the burnout. And one of my research participants described this as there's actually compassion satisfaction, right? We feel good as a result, right? We feel like these moments are the reason we wanted to become a chaplain, and they are replenishing, you know. And I've experienced that too, talking with students who have suicidal ideation, or a student who's been raped, or whose parent has just suddenly died, right? And those are horrible, and you never want anyone to have to go through that suffering. But when you can embody this presence of Kalyanamitra, it adds to the quality of that relationship in such a way that you as the chaplain are renewed rather than burned out. And you're also helping the care seeker in a very meaningful way to grow spiritually in that difficult moment. So that's really where Kalyanamitra comes in the framework, and why it's a step beyond chaplain, right? So I probably talked about this already. So Kalyanamitra and spiritual care, it's an embodied presence. It's an embodied presence, and you're really bringing your prajna, your wisdom, into the practice of chaplaincy. So it's a melding of those things. And you're also facilitating the spiritual growth of others, right? I probably should have moved on to that slide a little earlier. So what are the lessons in this for Buddhist chaplains? We as chaplains, we need spiritual friends, right? The chaplains who could embody spiritual friendship are the chaplains who spoke most strongly of having had good spiritual friends for themselves, right? I'm delighted to have some of my spiritual friends on this call. Victor is here, Jitsujo is here, Jane is here, Daphna is here, my spiritual friends who helped me become a spiritual friend to others. We also need to avoid unwholesome friends and or have healthy boundaries. There are discussions in the sutra of how to relate to angry people, people that's their predominant way, and to avoid people who may harm you or who may harm your reputation, or how to treat them. You can have compassion for them, yes, but you don't necessarily want to associate with them. And what that tells me is that in our line of work, the personal is professional. We can't leave it at the door, right? So in our personal lives, we have to cultivate wholesome friendships and have healthy relationships. We can cultivate virtues and act as friends to others. We can act as Kalyanamitra toward others in our role as a chaplain. And the practice of Kalyanamitra benefits those others and ourselves simultaneously, because the line between self and other is just broken down. It just benefits across the board. Okay. All right, so that's my presentation. I'm going to stop there and take questions. And I know Jitsujo's question about theological reflection is still hanging out there, and we can talk more about that, or we can talk about what you guys want to talk about.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation. Encourage everyone to get this book. I ordered it while it was happening. So get it to read, to get those details. I'll ask just a question I had prepared, and if anyone wants to ask questions, they can either put them in the chat or raise the little hand on their screen. That's an option somewhere in the reactions, I think, menu. But the question I'll just start with is that it's really interesting that this is collected information. I mean, this is a lot of these practices to different degrees are happening in chaplaincy field. But you now have sort of gathered all of this and created a formal presentation that could be taught in a clinical setting, in a educational setting, in an academic setting. I'm wondering then, this is kind of like where do you go from here? What would be the ideal path for like the clinical development of this model of care? Can you see it being used in CPE? How do you imagine that?
Yeah, I can see it being used in CPE, and I would encourage any CPE supervisor who has a Buddhist student to familiarize themselves with this framework, because part of a CPE supervisor's role is to assess their students' progress and help them to develop. And one thing that the research participants I worked with a lot pointed out was supervisors tended to be pretty good at this most of the time, not universally, but most of the time. But peers really struggled because every time you're presenting a verbatim or a question to a peer, you have to start with Buddhist 101. What are the Four Noble Truths, right? What is, how do Buddhists understand suffering? What is the role of desire? You know, what are the two truths? What are the paramitas? I mean, you spend so much time on Buddhism 101 that you never really get to the point where you're pushed to go deeper, and no one can challenge you because you're the only Buddhist in the room. What are they going to say? No, you're not understanding prajna correctly, right? So I really encourage any CPE supervisor to consult this literature and then come up with ways to help the peers to educate themselves to also be better spiritual friends to their Buddhist cohort while they're in CPE. So that you don't have to keep doing the Buddhist 101 and not getting any further yourself. That was a common issue with many of the participants in this research. I do see it possibly being used in the classroom setting as a textbook. I know how boring that sounds. I set out to write the first Buddhist chaplain textbook because I didn't have any, right? And we kept having to translate from the Christian books and sometimes the Jewish ones, and they're wonderful and great, but they're just not, just having to do all that translation was so messy sometimes. Where I'm going from here is working on volume 2, which focuses on pragmatic skills, and that should be out in the summer, and then finishing up the Mapping Buddhist Chaplains in North America survey. So that's where I'm going, so I'm keeping busy. But I see that Riverain has her hand up.
Hey, oh, I can put it down. Yeah, I had, oh, I put it in the chat, but I had seen this before, Kalyanamitra, and in Suzanne Mrazek's book, Virtuous Bodies, talked a lot about it. And I was, but she referred to it as beautiful friend. And she also said it meant beautiful and good. And I just wondered, in your research, did you also see that translation, and how, if so, like, how would you think about like the beautifulness of it?
Mm-hmm. Well? Yes, I did run across that. So Kalya is a really interesting term. I sometimes think it's as flexible as the English idiom cool, right? It's a multivalent positive term. It's beautiful, it's good, it's virtuous, it's wholesome, right? All of those good things. And beautiful is a common one. I chose spiritual friendship because of the soteriological significance of the term, because it causes you to grow in your spiritual path. But I think beautiful friend is also a wonderful translation, a perfectly appropriate translation. And to me, there is something beautiful about it, not in the sense that it's something that you see or smell or hear, but there is a sense of sacred beauty in those moments when you're present to witness someone else's spiritual growth. And it is beautiful, no question about it. I see a question in the chat. Facilitating the care seeker's ability to reflect on their situation in light of their own wisdom. Yeah. Wisdom rather than their emotions or feelings. Well, I think emotions and feelings have a certain amount of wisdom in them. They're not always wise, but they can be. They can be. So I wouldn't distinguish wisdom from emotion or feeling, but I would say that their own wisdom is in their own understanding of themselves and their situation and their pre-existing religious or spiritual traditions or philosophy, if they have one, that supports them in moving towards their own spiritual goals, right? So if a care seeker is experiencing the loss of someone they love, And their goal is to find beauty after grief. What you're listening for is their own wisdom that tells them how to do that. And it will be there. It will. It might be buried like the diamond in the dirt from the Buddhist metaphor, but it will be there. And so you're really facilitating their ability to think about their situation, to feel about their situation, right? In ways that help uncover that wisdom, or that occasionally lead them to new sources of wisdom. Occasionally we're pointing and, we're the finger pointing at the moon, but we're not the moon, and we're not them who's looking at the moon, right? They have to see it for themselves. You can only help someone make meaning out of their suffering because it's a meaning they make for themselves. You can't do it for them, right? So that's why you're facilitating their ability to reflect and their ability to find their own wisdom. And once they've recognized it as wisdom, even if it's the same thing even if you both are seeing the same thing, it's theirs because they've internalized it and they've put it to practice in their life, and it's made a positive change in their life in some way. Does that help? Does that answer your question? Right. And this kind of goes back to what Jitsujo was talking about with the whole theological reflection, because in the standards of professional practice for chaplains, in the CPE outcomes, it's written that we are supposed to facilitate theological reflection for care seekers, right? And I recapitulate that as facilitating their ability to reflect on their situation in light of their own wisdom. For me, that's what that really means, right? But for the chaplains that I interviewed, they really struggled with that word theological. Some of them were like, oh, sure, theological's fine. The Buddhist sutras talk about gods. It's fine. We can use that word. For others, it was like, oh no, we don't really do that, but we sort of do that. So they would just adapt it. They would substitute dharmic or spiritual or something like that and adapt the concept. And others would completely reject it. They would see, no, I don't do theological reflection because my Buddhism is atheistic. I don't do theological reflection, and I don't facilitate it for care seekers because I don't know enough about the monotheistic traditions, right? But then when you ask them very carefully, about the conversations that they have, what did you talk about? What came as a result of that? How did that go? What do you think the outcome was? You listen very carefully, and it's like, well, that sounds like facilitating theological reflection to me, like textbook. So what I describe in some other research is that they actually were doing the thing they thought they weren't doing because they didn't understand or like the word theological. And because they thought they weren't facilitating theological reflection, they weren't getting good peer feedback about what they were doing because they thought they weren't doing it. So this creates what I call in another paper a semantic impasse, right? You're doing the thing that you say you're not, but because you think you're not getting supervision and feedback about it. And that's the problem, right? We can jettison the word. I could care less, right? I see Jessica's got her hand up.
Thank you, Monica, for the excellent lecture, and thank you for bringing this book for us. Finally, we have our first Buddhist chaplaincy textbook. So my question is, what is the biggest challenge for Buddhist chaplains in your career and also from your interview? And to handle with this challenge, what's a suggestion you give us to the Buddhist chaplain student? Thank you.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges is, it's interesting because it's a challenge and also a good thing in a certain way, is navigating our profession in a Christian hegemonic space. Chaplaincy was invented by, conceived of, offered by Christians for dozens, if not hundreds of years. And they're really good at it. And we can learn from them. And at the same time, we have to translate everything we do and everything they tell us we're supposed to do as Buddhists. And we may come to situations where we're like, no, we shouldn't be doing that as chaplains, or yes, we should be doing this completely other thing as chaplains, and having some of those hard conversations. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for Buddhist chaplaincy, especially in America, but in almost all westernized spaces, and even in some Asian countries, they're like, no, we don't have chaplains, that's a Christian thing. Well, not anymore. There are Buddhist chaplains, there are Jewish chaplains, Muslim, Hindu. I have a pagan chaplain on my staff, and she's wonderful. She's one of my most trusted chaplains. Did she get an MDiv in pagan chaplaincy? No, that doesn't exist. But she's wonderfully, wonderfully educated and skilled. So navigating our profession in this Christian hegemonic space is something we're going to have to continue to do for good and for not bad, but frustration. Hey, Fong.
Hi. I wanted to further touch upon that point about the Christian hegemonic, whatever. In any case, there's like valid criticism about that, of course. And we're starting to now see in the academic field where current scholars are questioning the colonialism of the history, and we draw a lot of our inspiration from Master Taishi, who for better or for worse came up with a really profound motto that over decades led to what we have now. And yet now scholars are critically thinking about his role now, and there's a professor in UC Riverside, Matthew King, who wrote a entire book about the colonialism and why we need to start questioning how we look at Asian history and Asian religion in that framework. And so I don't really have a question, but it piqued my interest that you're talking about that now in a very relevant time that we live in, that we're looking back at history, looking back at certain paradigms that have come from the studying of history, and part of our job as scholars too is to constantly reevaluate things, and this the Buddhist chaplaincy has achieved critical mass now, where I think it is imperative that we talk about that, and in this field especially, the word chaplain itself is a Christian term, and so how do we reconcile that? And I suspect a lot of reservation, especially from Asian students studying Buddhist chaplaincy, is the inability to reconcile these entirely separate concepts that we're trying to talk in a space where as though it's accepted. It just isn't, and we need to acknowledge that.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Fong. And actually the last topic of the Chaplaincy Innovation Unit at the American Academy of Religions conference last fall was decolonizing chaplaincy education. And there were several wonderful papers in that panel presentation. You can look it up and you can find the authors and review that work, so that it is a topic in conversation now. And there have been some wonderful books published. My favorite is The Making of Buddhist Modernism by David McMahon, where he's drawing out the threads of these interactions where, yes, to some extent it is Westerners applying Western paradigms onto Asian cultures and Buddhism. And on the other hand, it's also Asians who are doing some of the adapting and the modernizing because they see some value in something that the colonists had brought, or because they're trying to legitimate themselves in the eyes of the colonial powers, lots of different forces. But the thing I think about the most is that every time Buddhism has traveled from one country to another, it has adapted to particular ways of being and practicing and understanding the professional role of religious leaders within that new culture, right? So when you think about ancient India, the aesthetics of the original Buddhist Sangha were wanderers, literally homeless, right? And they would wander for many months, and then they would find a place to stay during the rains for about 3 months, and then they would go out and wander again. And eventually they did create some settled monasteries, but that's not necessarily where you would find the majority of the monastics all of the time. But when Buddhism moved into China, you really can't wander. I mean, China has a much different climate. You really can't wander around like that and just sleep in the forest most of the year. That's not really going to work. So they developed more settled communities, and they actually owned, the monasteries owned land and engaged in agriculture and other kind of crafts and trades. And then, you know, Buddhism went to Japan, and in Japan, for political reasons, they tried to kill the Buddhist Sangha by saying monks have to be married. So what happened? They just got a bunch of married monks, right? They adapted, and Buddhism hung around. So now we have Zen priests instead of, you know, celibate monastics, but it worked for hundreds of years. So now here, Buddhism is coming into the West at an unprecedented pace, right? This religion has never traveled this fast, and this is true for all religions. It's never traveled this fast and adapted this quickly and come from so many different sources. It's not just coming from one country into another. It's coming from every Buddhist Asian country into every other country all at the same time. And it shows up, and in the United States, we have a pre-existing paradigm for chaplain. You can be a chaplain. And so this becomes an option for Buddhists where it wasn't before. And we should critically question that. Is that appropriate? Do we want to turn around and re-import it to China or not, right? And to me, it's not a question of, have Buddhists been providing spiritual care? Of course, we have been providing spiritual care for 2,500 years in our own ways. And for me, it's just a process of rediscovery and then explaining that very carefully to people here in the United States and to people who are part of the chaplaincy field. So the three prajnas, Kalyanamitra, this is not new. This is old as it gets, right? I'm just explaining how in this context, those things are still relevant. So that's kind of how I see that whole big question. I'm going to put up contact information. You are more than welcome to reach out to me via email. You can find almost all of my research on my academia.edu site, like including much more about theological reflection, much more about Buddhist globalization and the diaspora and all kinds of things.
So we are past the hour, and just out of consideration for Monica's time, I just wanted to, maybe if anyone has any other questions, to just go ahead and use that email and reach out privately. Just wanted to take a moment, if Victor or Jitsujo had any final words to say to us. I sent you a little chat. I don't know if you had a comment you wanted to make.
Well, thank you, Monica, for sharing your research, and I am so proud beyond words of your achievements and of this book in particular. I promised all the students that if you write the book, we will teach from it. And this year we will cover your book in Pastoral Theology, MD 650, as promised. And of course, we will discuss parts of it for MD 515, PPD, Power, Privilege, and Difference, as well as the first part in MD 540, Sacred Abrahamic Text. So
my publisher will be glad to hear all of that.
And finally, our club president, Chuan Chi, is reminding me to tell everyone that if they have any ideas or suggestions for our club, to please email us. We'll put that email in the chat, or use our Discord. That's US Chaplaincy Club at gmail.com. That's our email. And then one final big thank you to Monica for giving us this presentation. And perhaps just a few words of to sort of offer the merit of this gathering based on what we've heard today. Having listened, may we contemplate and practice spiritual care and friendship for ourselves and others. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.